You've landed on episode 6 of our multi-episode series all about how to market a nonprofit. In this episode, I sit down with a longtime professional friend and colleague, Jake Bohall, one of the finest SEOs I've ever had a chance to work with. Considering I've worked with a lot, that's saying something. Jake Bohall is the co-founder and vice president of Hive Digital Marketing, a 20-plus-year-old Raleigh, North Carolina digital marketing powerhouse, and one of my favorite all-time digital marketing teams. So get ready to drink from the fire hose of SEO knowledge. We'll cover keyword research for MPOs, SEO on a budget, modern-day link building, the connection between social media and SEO, EEAT, knowledge panel, storytelling, citations, local SEO, artificial intelligence, entities, user journeys. I'll put it this way. We cover basic SEO, advanced SEO, controversial theories, nonprofit-specific tactics. It's all in there. If you're serious about ranking your nonprofit, you should download this episode to your device so you can take notes and listen everywhere you go. Speaking of which, don't forget to subscribe so you can don't forget to subscribe. Do it right now so you can catch all of our nonprofit marketing releases both now and when we revisit this niche in the future. I promise you we're going to. And pretty please, hit that like button. Think of it as a donation of kindness to the Niche Marketing Podcast. Buckle up, niche marketers. Here comes a killer episode with Jake Bohall from Hive Digital Marketing. Welcome back to another episode of the Niche Marketing Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John Bertino, founder, CEO of The Agency Guide. If you're unhappy with your marketing agency, and many people are, give us a shout at The Agency Guide. We represent over 300 vetted marketing teams, agencies, and services providers to whom we can match make to the right projects based on industry, scope of work, budget, all these types of things. Check us out at theagencyguide.com. Speaking of agencies we represent, today, I am so delighted to have Mr. Jake Bohall, co-founder of Hive Digital in Raleigh, North Carolina. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John.
I almost want to do one of the welcome to the show, because I'm so happy to have you here. I always like to say actually that for a niche marketing podcast, we do not biased towards just agencies we work with. In fact, a lot of our guests are people that we've just met or, based on some light research we found have somewhat of a stranglehold is not the word, but have specifically carved out market share in a specific niche. And we invite them on the show to talk about it. It's not the case here. I've known you for over a decade. You've been extremely helpful to me, my company, and for a multitude of tag clients that we've matchmaked, is that a word? That we've brought to Hive Digital because you guys were truly the best resource. And you are an absolute wealth of information with all things SEO, content marketing, search marketing, among other things. And again, stoked to have you here.
I really appreciate it, John. In fact, I have to also say, it's been fantastic having a relationship with you as well. You've brought us amazing clients, and your ability to find the people that are going to be aligned with us, both just in how we approach our business and how our personalities are as an agency. I think you've done a great job of that, and that's why those relationships have lasted and worked out for both of us. So,
yeah, excellent. Thank you. We do pay attention to those nuances. All right, so before we get into SEO, search marketing for nonprofits, which we're here to focus on today, I do like to get a little background on the guest and the agency you work for, so folks have that as proper context. Let's start with you, Jake. Where are you from? How long you been in search marketing, and how'd you get into it, and how'd you get to Hive? All those things.
Awesome. It's a really long story, so I'll try to just keep it as short as I can.
Give us the truncated version.
So I dropped out of college to start a wine marketing, an insurance services company, and that was fun and an old antiquated industry. And then I started basically a Netflix for wine, which wine industry also a very old antiquated
Netflix.
Industry. Yeah, we were trying to just mail you wine and you taste it, and we did taste attribute profiling for your taste buds. It was a company called Taste Vine. We lost a lot of money trying to figure out how to legally mail wine, which
yes,
now it would be great. Then not so much. But along the way, we hired this cool agency, Verante, which inevitably now has become Hive Digital. We hired this agency to do our marketing, build our website. And when it didn't work for us on the Taste Vine side, we sort of pivoted to Grape Thinking, which was a marketing consulting company for wineries. We were millennials trying to help help these wineries build e-com sites and do their own direct-to-consumer sales where it was legal. That took off, and at some point I ended up reselling a lot of Verante services because it worked. And then at some point they said, hey, you should come work for Verante. And I said, I'm an entrepreneur, damn it. And I'll do it for a year just because I like you guys and you've helped me out. And that was in 2007, I think, or 2008. And so I came on board to lead strategy and sales and project management side of things, and then fell under the mentorship of Russ Jones. And
a prominent SEO.
Yes, I should say the late Russ Jones. He was my mentor up until 2015 when he left to go to Moz, which was his dream job, was to work for Moz. And at that point, I took over the SEO department. About a year or so later, we reincorporated as Hive Digital so that we could focus, even in our incorporating documents, focus specifically on mission-driven organizations. And now I'm co-founder of Hive and have a team of about 19 people, I think, at the moment. That's rock solid. I love all of them, and we're trying to make a difference in the world.
Yeah, great boutique agency size. A few threads I just want to pull on quickly there. It's funny, the way I came to know you guys was similar to the way you came to work for your own organization, which is I had a marketing need. It was actually a link cleanup, if memory serves me correct.
Penguin.
Yes. Some company I was working with had bought a bunch of terrible links, needed them cleaned up. I don't remember how I found you guys in the first place, but you guys did such an absolutely stellar job on it.
Was it Remove 'em? We had...
Yes.
So we built one of the first... Outside of a couple other platforms out there, we had the first link cleanup, link auditing platform, which was sort of oddly contradictory because we were an agency who built links, and then simultaneously we built another platform that would get rid of them. For what it was worth, it was to get rid of our competitors' links,
right?
And it was actually a play off an emergency button that we had for clients,
right?
That in the past, if you over link build, you would get penalties, and there was a couple of instances that we accidentally prospected a competitor's blog, for example, and got outed. And so we had just this delete all links button that like mass emailed people and stuff. And so when Penguin hit, it was like, okay, we could take that functionality and carve it out for everybody who's trying to undo all of the shitty stuff. Sorry, can I curse on you?
You can say whatever you want.
Stuff that they had been doing in the past. So it worked out, and obviously that tool got a lot of exposure for us.
It really did work wonders for me. By the way, the agency over 2 decades old at this point?
2002, actually. Yeah. So we're 23, 22 years old.
As I always say, an eternity in digital marketing years for an agent, for a digitally focused agency. And then also you just mentioned the late Russ Jones. I mean, for those that have been in the game long enough, Russ was a preeminent thought leader in the early stages of SEO, and he was one of the, I guess, originators of Verante. Or
yeah, he was the brains behind early Verante, and I would add that he also brought, I think, some of that early energy for doing things that were more altruistic for the marketplace. Like we had Pound Privacy, which was a privacy initiative that if you just added a pound sign into your search queries, like search engines wouldn't store that data, or wouldn't get passed through. We built Open CAPTCHA, which is actually one of our early ins for meeting people at inside of search engines, because we at the time hosted the largest free CAPTCHA service in the world. Then Akismet, came along as well, but it wasn't a tool that was any profit whatsoever. It was built because we wanted to catch link spam and understand, what was triggering flags for link spam, so that we could just explore some of the gray areas ourselves. But it was, we just built these kinds of tools and released them. And a lot of that was all, Russ's, enthusiasm and drive. And, it meant a lot. It was quite influential for me.
So an agency built on the back and mind of one of the great SEOs of our time, I think is saying a lot. 23 years later, you guys have done work across all different verticals, by no means just nonprofit, but these days it's a bit of a focal point for the organization. So tell us about Hive now, if you could.
Yeah. So now our focus is mission-driven organizations, which generally is nonprofit. So we do obviously work outside of the nonprofit sector, but we as a company want our portfolio to eventually be nothing but nonprofit organizations, or those that are very clearly mission-driven orgs, and we're also sort of thinking ahead and trying to carve out space to help those companies that are trying to make that transition. Because a lot of companies, they have their own focus and mission. And when we can get involved on the marketing side and say, hey, what if you tried this? What if you tried this for a link building strategy? And we can coax them to do, positive, impactful things in their communities as part of their marketing strategies, and not not like buy off somebody's, debts for press, but just literally like, how can you contribute in your community? Because that's where you're going to get, some of the value and brand impression that you want. So like those things are a focus of ours, rooted in the idea that, and when we rebranded in 2015, 2016, the driving force behind it is we were actually at a crossroad with the agency, and there was a sort of natural feast or famine that happens with agencies. You get like this giant client on board, you hire a bunch of people, that client inevitably, hires internally, and now you have to shrink resources, and that means layoffs. And emotionally, that was a lot for us. Come to the point where we were literally debating, and for me personally, like, should I just quit and go work for like an NGO? Like that sounds like more, I love education. I want to start my own school one day and so forth. And so I was like, I don't know why I'm working for this agency that, we have all these clients that I kind of don't like them. I'm not proud of all of them. And I was also just becoming a father to my first daughter, my daughter, and I have an older child, but my first baby that I was holding. And, there was like this moment where it's like, I want to brag to my child about who I work for and what I do, and I want them to be proud. And I can't do that with all of my clients, and that is not that's not good. Like I don't want to do that. I want to come in and say like, hey, we're helping the company that does facial recognition in airports to stop child trafficking. That's meaningful and gives purpose to what we do. And so when we reincorporated, we decided instead of quitting and working for an NGO or something, like we could just be an agency focused on businesses that we felt were making the impacts we want to see, the change we want to see in the world. And then most importantly, that we could provide a culture within our own company where the employees are working on things that have meaning to them. So, some employees are passionate about, music, some are about, equitable rights like between genders or races or whatever. And each of these people have a purpose or a mission that they feel calls them. And so it became more of the focus, like, how can I find clients that give each of my very talented marketers a portfolio that is breathing life into them and simultaneously like making an impact in the world. And so that's the new Hive that we've been trying to create. And it's, you don't just pivot from being, a very capitalist business, to one that's, it is a change that we've been making, but I feel that we're making the progress that I want. And I hope that we're going to get that just portfolio mix nailed down. I mean, our goal is 2030. We would like to just be fully there 2030. So we'll see.
Excellent. There's some really cool subtopics and threads in there just about building an agency where everyone's mission aligned. We'll have to bring you back and have a discussion just about that.
Anytime.
In the meantime, we'll segue into nonprofit specific challenges, considerations, again, through that lens of SEO and search marketing. Let's start from the top. First, if you could just maybe quickly define what SEO is to you or how you think about it, and then any unique challenges that nonprofits face or opportunities that they have that might be different from other industries.
SEO in general, there's a lot of ways that it gets interpreted. Obviously, search engine optimization, the goal is, how do I rank this site to the top of the search engines? From our agency's perspective, when we are talking about SEO, it's how do I ensure that I'm creating an experience on our site that reflects the intent of the users coming from search? Because if I can marry that, then I'm creating a positive experience for people, for whether it's Google, Bing, Facebook, app stores, wherever the search is occurring. ChatGPT and other generative AI, is the new frontier for that. But how do we make sure that the content that is the best fit shows up first and that we're able to meet the needs of those users? And doing that effectively, that is search engine optimization. Because if you're capable of doing that, all the other metrics for, engagement, stickiness, conversion, et cetera, align. And instead of ranking number one and disappointing more people, you rank number one and enhance the lives of others. And that's the goal of the search engine as well.
Yeah, you won't last for long if your experience isn't aligning with search engine.
And generally you tank your brand. It's like all of the people who invested in, wanting to do the deal of the day stuff. There's like a restaurant be like, oh, I'm going to do this, deal that people can buy, and then their restaurants implode because they get too much traffic, whatever. Same thing happens for sites. They rank number one for the wrong thing. Like their sales teams get inundated with bad questions, all those
unqualified
kinds of
leads. Yeah.
For nonprofits, though, I think there is a unique challenge in SEO, and that generally their energy is focused on the audiences that they're trying to change, like the impact that they're trying to make. And a lot of SEO is, internal marketing. Like, how do we focus on content that showcases our leadership? How do we, establish relationships that will build citations and references for authority? And how do we make sure our technical infrastructure is great? And a lot of these nonprofits are like, how do I make sure that I'm getting more donations, right? So that I can go empower somebody in the field who's, helping a needy family get dinner, right? Like that is like, that's where they want their money to go. And feeling like they have to pay for an agency to, $1,000 and you're going to build me a landing page. So maybe I get donations. Like I could take that $1,000 and feed 20 families like that. There's a huge challenge at the resource of budget, because, they're intentionally driven on making the impact they want. And, you're carving out a future, a future benefit by like, okay, let's invest long-term in SEO, where they're wanting immediate change everywhere. And then I think the second biggest challenge is so like that budget allocation in general, and then getting the budget, because generally a lot of them are grant-based or donation-based, and like they'll get windfalls. Somebody passes away and, leaves an estate and that kind of thing. They'll get a windfall, or somebody makes a handsome donation, but that doesn't create stability and budget that we need as a marketing agency for maintaining, these types of campaigns that they have. And
because SEO takes time, just to be clear.
Yes.
It can take a lot of time. And so, there needs to be a concerted effort over, several months, sometimes, if not a full year or what have you, to get significant traction.
Yeah. Because it's not just the time of implementing the changes, but it's also, collecting the content from experts, right? Like we want to have a better landing page. Like we need you, getting images of your volunteers making these changes. Let's get stories of the people whose lives have been touched and make sure those are shared well on this. And like everybody has a hard time doing that. I mean, a plumber has a hard time doing that, let alone, somebody who's out there just volunteering and giving their last bit of energy to make a difference.
It's interesting you went there talking about the pictures and the stories. It's interesting only because we sat down to focus on SEO, search engine optimization, and whereas the storytelling and the imagery has come up time and time again in my other nonprofit expert marketing discussions, I'm surprised we got there already. So how or why is it that you find storytelling or sourcing of different types of content, such as images, playing into ranking higher? Can you connect those dots?
Anytime you have an emotional story or emotional connection that you're making with others, they're going to want to share it, right? Like it's impactful and meaningful for them. On the nonprofit side, like that's how you get donations. I mean, there's a reason why there's, sad children in the video, or, injured puppies. They're not putting the happy, playful ones asking for your money. It creates the engagement and buzz that drives new link, new brand mentions, and those kinds of things. The social share side happens behind it. I mean, it's impactful. Our goal in marketing is to influence the behavior of other people's. We have to know what that behavior is, measure it to change it. But once we are effectively measuring it, now we can try these new things to see what makes the biggest difference. And every single time, if you have an emotional trigger, any impulse, right? Like think about, I'm going to make an impulse move, like a donation, right? Like if I'm not thinking about estate planning and I'm just sort of browsing for a cause or a thought and I see something, like you want that person to immediately have their heartstrings pulled and feel a calling and a connection in order to draw them in. And I think just to back up for a second, one of the other big challenges with nonprofits, most businesses, we're looking at just the customer. So like in this case, like a donor for a nonprofit, but nonprofits marketing presence, they're looking for donors. They're looking for volunteers. They're looking for candidates, right? Like who needs our help, right? So like if you're, Meals on Wheels, like you're wanting people to know that you exist so that they can reach out to you and say, I need help.
Yeah.
You're
very
also
distinct, differentiated audience personas.
Yeah. So the website presence, normally with a giant enterprise, it's a lot easier because you've got, partner teams and, marketing sales teams, you got an HR, department. All of those are independently functioning with their own budgets and that kind of thing. With a nonprofit, they're all sharing a budget, and there's there's a typical shortfall on volunteerism, right? Like they need more people to volunteer. Volunteers generally don't stay around forever.
Right.
Right. And which is its own problem in project management side with nonprofits. They're trying to cater to a lot of different audiences with their web presence, which can be a bit confusing for a search algorithm to understand. Like, are we looking for hungry people? Are we looking for, people who want to donate to hungry people? Are we looking for restaurants? Why does this site exist?
So it's the job of the search marketing team to create kind of clearly differentiated landing pages and messaging, depending on which customer archetype, if we could call them customers, audience archetype we're looking to appeal to, right? We want to be very cognizant of muddling the message on what that page, again, the intent of that page, what it's trying to solve across those different archetypes.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest differences in a lot of nonprofit sites and homepages versus others is the need to clearly bifurcate some very different audiences out of the gate. Whereas normally you're trying to is this enterprise or standard?
Right.
But on a nonprofit, it's like, are you a volunteer? Are you a donor? Are you in need of help?
Right.
And we are immediately sending you off into 3 different experiences based off of what are completely different archetypes of or demographics.
Right. And so again, to kind of connect those dots to SEO, what the search engines are looking for is when someone landed on the site, did they get the experience they needed? So it's not just about appeasing visitors, although you're absolutely looking to do that too. You're simultaneously appeasing search engines by making those journeys throughout the site very clear and distinct, right? Speaking of appeasing search engines, we were talking a few moments ago about imagery and messaging that you incorporate in the site for impact to resonate, create an emotional connection. The algorithmic benefit of that, right, is more time on site, more positive user experience signals, more sharing, more repeat visits, all of which are supposed to have an impact on your ability to rank, correct?
Well, and now that we've just had these testimonies in front of the judicial department, we know they impact your ability to rank, right? Because they're using those engagement metrics directly to influence the ranking position of sites in search.
Yep. Whereas before that was a little bit of a hazy.
Before they argued that you couldn't do traffic shaping and we knew that because we could run experiments and see it. Some small aspect, but we could never do it at scale. And now we understand that, yes, we were seeing those anecdotal results because they were influencing, and that we just didn't know how to scale it.
Let's take a step back to where to begin. So whether I'm an in-house SEO or we're an agency looking to improve the rankings of a nonprofit, it all starts with keyword research, or at least that's one of the fundamental pillars of where you begin. Could you talk a little bit about keyword research, your process, what you should be looking for, regardless of whether it's for a nonprofit?
Obviously step 1 is identifying your audience and what is it that they would be searching for? That's the goal of keyword research, is what are the people looking for what I have to offer, typing into their search bars or verbalizing into Alexa or whatever device
but
they may
interact
be using.
Somewhat easier said than done, right? Or not quite as obvious and intuitive, right? If it was as easy as just, taking stakeholders in an organization saying, what do people want? That would get you 70% of the way there, 80% of the way there, but there's a lot of gems that come out in those research tools.
There are. So actually it's interesting because generally I'm opposed to the idea of keyword research. Not because I
Hot
think,
take.
Yeah, not because
Jake Bohall says keyword research doesn't matter.
SEO is dead. No, the idea of keyword research historically was we could go and use ads, the API for Google Ads and identify what's being leveraged or bid on and paid search. We would run paid campaigns and see what were the actual exact match queries that people were using that triggered our ads related to any particular term. And the goal at the time for SEO was that any one of these long tail keywords, we could then build a page, incorporate the phrasing, and have no problem ranking for that as long as it was long tail enough and we were the authority. With the advances in language modeling with Google and Mum and BERT and keep going, the idea of an individual keyword phrase has lost its meaning. Google is very capable now of taking any search long long tail search phrase that is entered into its query, and breaking that down into a vector model of the keyword topics.
Yes,
and
they understand things, not strings, as I've heard it said.
Exactly.
Understanding the topic, what bubbles up to that topic, in other words, the breakdown of the subtopics of parent topic. It's not simply looking for a sequence of words together.
Correct. So now it is very easy to rank a page without exact match keywords. In fact, if you're more topically relevant, like Q tools like MarketMuse and that sort of thing, if you're more topically relevant around a keyword phrase, you're more likely to rank than another site that might even have the exact match on it.
Did you hear that, everybody? You do not need to have the exact match keyword in the page, or even potentially, it doesn't need to be said over and over again throughout the site. It's about understanding the topic, what makes up that topic, and getting that content fully explored in the proper breadth and depth throughout the site.
And remember, Google's goal, or any search engine's goal when it gets a query back, is to try to figure out, what does this person actually want? Like if I'm searching for, I don't know, Frigidaire versus, Kenmore, like the search engine knows I'm actually trying to figure out a refrigerator to buy. Right? Keyword phrasing says I need an exact match page of comparing these two refrigerators. And like they're going to look for a page that meets the intent if I'm trying to compare, but they understand the underlying desire of the user is to discover more, refrigerator options, compare features, and find one to purchase. And Google's been announcing that they've been tracking journeys forever, right? Like I remember that was probably 10 years ago, they came out with like, do you know what it takes for someone to buy a car? Right? And like, it doesn't start with, Honda versus Toyota or whatever. It starts with like best car for families. And like 2 months later, it's like, how to best car for bicycles or camping. And then eventually that creates a profile that Google is literally watching what you're searching, and they're generating results around those journeys because they know what you're likely looking for next. So on the keyword research side, currently there's a lot of great tools, whether it's, Ahrefs or SEMrush or the Uber suggests. I'm sorry. I have to say, a lot of people go there, right? Or your common in your pocket tool like Search Console, using AdWords, leveraging ChatGPT. We can talk about that later, but there's the bulk of my keyword research now starts with asking ChatGPT, like we have a persona model that we want. Like you are this consumer. Can you provide like your key pain points that you're looking to have solved, the key features that you're looking for? And then we are mining those conversations to identify what concepts we need to convey. Like this solution is better because of X. And that might cover 1,000 keywords that never get mentioned on the page, but conceptually we are relevant and we will rank for them.
More on ChatGPT in a bit. Today's episode is brought to you by The Agency Guide. Are you frustrated with an underperforming marketing agency? Who isn't? Are you unsure about what marketing channels to invest in and who to invest with? Maybe you're just fed up with the overpromising and under-delivering of marketing agencies. Fear not. You need to contact The Agency Guide. The Agency Guide, or TAG, represents a vetted pool of 200 plus vetted marketing agencies and consultants, and they will matchmake your brand's specific needs with these trusted marketing professionals for free. That's right, for free. You don't need an expensive agency search firm. You need The Agency Guide. For over 10 years, TAG's experienced marketing consultants have been providing pro bono consulting and matching brands with vetted agencies based on needs, budget, timeline, location, even your personality. They're marketing professionals. They're agency matchmakers. They're The Agency Guide. To learn more, visit www.theagencyguide.com today. Let's continue to cover our bases just on the fundamentals of SEO for nonprofits. In doing my own topic modeling and research around this topic of SEO for nonprofits, a few things bubbled up as potential talking points. I want to get your take. Citations. Are they relevant for a nonprofit? So citations being, directory listings, name, address, and phone number in certain directories across the web that usually is a local SEO 101, something you want to accomplish. Are you typically doing those for?
We do. There's an aspect with link development or citations where part of what you're trying to paint is a picture of a business that is reputable and trustworthy and legitimate, right? Like, and I say these things because there's so many businesses on the web that are not. And like, there are some things that really distinguish the difference between the two. And one of them is, can a person physically walk into your business establishment? So like having an office or even a virtual office with a location or the
place where you get mail, where a human being needs to go to get mail.
Right. Like that has, I mean, they sort of hate on the virtual, PO box kind of scenario, but being a legitimate like storefront, right, where the like customers have a human to interface with, having a phone number that is a real number, and they can tell the difference between a virtual number and an actual number that's been purchased.
To be clear, you mean Google when you say they.
Yes.
And they use this as a hallmark of legitimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a simple point, but it's really, really important because they're trying to solve all of these things algorithmically. What's the best result? Well, one of the best results are ultimately going to come from the most trustworthy sources. Well, how do we know that someone's trustworthy? Believe it or not, a consistent name, address, and phone number, i.e. citation across the web, in multiple places is one of the big indicators for identifying this.
There's a reason why every single search that you place into Google or others tries to surface a map result. And that is because it is without question that if there is a local business to serve, like that is probably a better fit for anybody that's doing a search. So it doesn't mean that you have to be physically located everywhere, but it is a testament to the legitimacy that brings and the value that Google has for that.
Okay. So one of the first things I imagine you're going to do while you're cleaning up the site or shortly thereafter is doing the citations. With that would be the Google My Business stuff. Are they still calling it Google My Business?
I don't know what it's called.
Yeah,
they change it like every 2 months.
Exactly. I know this is a small, very 101 stuff for you, but like that's something else that needs to be done, right?
That's critical. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this particular tool still exists, but there used to be a tool where you could enter your brand name. And it would automatically, I think it was like Noam, maybe. And it would like automatically secure like a social profile for you with that username across all the major profiles. Like the key, it isn't just name and address and phone number, right? It's like, it is like generally when you think about citations as an SEO, like that's where everybody goes. But it is more like more brand mentions and brand presence. So like I want to make sure that my clients have a presence anywhere that their customers might be first, right? Like I don't care about creating a MySpace profile, but it doesn't hurt to have one pointing back to your site, and it's free. Why not? But there is an aspect of making sure that there is enough citations of your brand, and ideally you can get engagement in any networks that you're creating it, that it shows that legitimacy. So oftentimes that entails like either the brand or the website or the phone number or a link back to, a contact us page. Generally it's associated with a human. Like you have like on LinkedIn, right? You've got like, here are the employees, and those things are lending more and more credibility for your business being legitimate. And the more legitimate it is when you're competing and there's some doubt about your competitors, you're going to outrank them.
I don't know if I want to get into EAT just yet, but there's EAT signals there, right? Expertise, authority, and trust, or what's the second
EEAT. So expertise.
What's the other
experience was the new one that got added in.
Right, that's right.
Authority and trust. It's fun. I mean, a lot of people love the EAT acronym.
Give the quick overview since we're on.
But yeah, so it is essentially Panda was an algorithm update that rolled out like 2014 or something, I believe. And it was a essential change in the way Google valued sites based off of whether or not they were credible. And out of this came a bunch of acronyms. But at the time, we know that they were looking for things like, does this site have a phone number on the page? Does it have a human noted as the writer? Is the contact information readily available for this business? So like a lot of the early questions that were used to drive that first round of Panda were like very basic things about just, does this look legit versus not? And that has taken a whole life of its own, partly the SEO community just having some simple concept to just build on. And the other part is like, there's fundamental value in a site has expertise. So it's written by somebody who knows what they're talking about. We don't have, a non-educated person writing articles about how to, deal with marital strife or deal with a medical condition. You have experience, which they just recently added. So like
similar take.
The site doesn't suck, right? Like I can navigate it. Authoritative, is does my brand have credibility? Like, do we have citations, links, references on the page itself for authority? It's playing a bit into, I think, the expertise, I mean, they kind of roll in, and then trustworthy. So a lot of what they're looking at is external factors. So like, does this site have poor ratings on other sites? Like, how are people reviewing it on third-party sites, and are those reviews legitimate? So I think that's
very much
ballpark.
one of those what's old is new again, right? I think to your point, a big part of what you were getting at with your answer is these are things that Google's been trying to solve more or less all along, or certainly for well over a decade. But as they've gotten more pointed and specific in their approach, new acronyms or ways of conceptualizing this have emerged, one of which has been EEAT, which has been on the tips of SEO tongues for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's funny because so many people are sort of baffled by how the search engines would work. And like, there's obviously technical nuance for like,
Right.
Can they find a canonical tag or that sort of stuff? But like, ultimately, they're trying to process an algorithm that is the same that you would have as a general human processing a bunch of information. I would like to eat at a restaurant downtown. I would like to know from my friends. So citations like, hey,
Right.
you guys have anybody that you recommend? I'm going to look at the menu. Does the content look like something that I actually would like to consume? That type of thing. Like, what is the vibe? Where is it located? Like, these are all things that we don't even think about, but they are, these algorithmic measurements that we place for every decision on where we go or what we buy. And the search engine is applying those same concepts to every website or product to try to produce the equivalent response of, hey, we just human curated the entire internet to give you the thing you were looking for.
Yep. I wanted to hold off on getting into links, but I think you just gave me the perfect segue.
I will take it.
So just quickly explain the value of links in SEO. Still to this day, you probably too, Jake, I am on calls regularly with brands looking for new agencies where they don't fully understand this idea of a link, a backlink, link building, link acquisition. Please explain what it is, and then we can get into the broader subject of unique opportunities for nonprofits.
Perfect. Google was originally called Backrub, and the entire thing that made Google different was the fact that they looked at incoming links from other sites as a way of doing authority, whereas at the time, all other just well-known search engines were just looking at content on the page. And so what made Google special was they looked at citation or links as an authority metric. And so today we have that same that same rule still applies, and that there's, as more people linked to an asset or a page, then that means that it has more popularity, sentiment, and the quality of your neighbor or the quality of the person voting or whatever, however you want to refer to it. Like, those things have taken their own algorithm and nuance. But ultimately,
not all links are created equal.
Exactly. Yeah. Not everything. There's a guy, Link Moses, who had this phrase.
Shout out Link Moses.
Yes. Shout out, buddy. He's passed away actually, but that's okay. But like his big statement was that great link building is indistinguishable from great marketing. And that is that, when you're doing link development, the goal isn't to go out and just buy links, because, it's easy to tell that like these people were paid in line to make that restaurant look busy, as opposed to it's legitimately a place that people love. And for search engines, they're able to distinguish those differences as well. So between a great link or a poor one. So clients do come to us and they say, hey, we want link building. And it's challenging because Google is actively seeking to eliminate their dependence on link building. And we've been watching this happen forever. And the most interesting part about it is after Penguin, and what a lot of people didn't realize is that Penguin was essentially Google outsourcing the link spam team to all of the webmasters, so we would disavow the links that we hate. And in exchange, they got an influx of human audited links to train their AI model on how to detect what a paid link looks like. And so the takeaway is that right now I could go out and build 100 links. Maybe 90 of them, Google is just like, I kind of don't like how that looks. And it brings absolutely no value, and only 10 of them bring value. And so one of the changes that we've made as an agency in our link building is that we no longer sell link building as like, this is the thing that we're doing, right? It's more like, how can we, all good strategies cycle back, right? But like, I mean, Jim Boykin had the We Build Pages model forever ago. Like, let's build a great asset and the links will come.
Right.
And, now it's not so much let's build a great page, but it's let's find what we have that is unique that we could present to a community that will foster more discussion that involves our brand or references us. So like maybe, especially as a nonprofit, right? Like they have all of these stats about, the income levels or what
research,
the impoverished community that they're trying to help. Like, yeah, their research that they're leveraging to try to get donations, right? Like, the Human Rights Foundation shows up and says like X number of million people were oppressed, in this country, and here's why and how. And so like those sort of impactful numbers or metrics from their research make fantastic infographic campaigns. So Ann Smarty, is literally reinventing, herself with her agency doing, sites a form of infographic marketing, but it's not infographic marketing as much as it is data marketing, right? Like figuring out like, what do we have that's interesting? Can we compare how much house you can buy for your income by state, which we all think is a really cool and interesting thing. And then all of a sudden, different communities in Reddit are like, my state sucks and like my state's great. And like, there's, this
then you can reference
natural
that content.
Exactly.
Which
and
results in the backlink.
And quite frankly, it results in that particular case, which is actually one of our case studies. Like she was on all of the local news, like all of the local news organizations in cities or states where they're advocated for, like, we're the winner. Like, we're the top town for X, like they're going to brag about it. And your business that just happened to know that data point is going to get referenced as a citation, and you're getting a voice. And, and even those that, aren't reflected well still take to the streets to argue how they were, misrepresented, or, like it's not as bad as you think. Right. But there's still conversation that happens. So I think link building now is more about how do I create an engaging conversation about my brand, that could be somebody writes a blog post and links back to my site. It could be somebody makes a TikTok video and talks about me.
But to be clear, any links in social platforms technically don't pass link value. Right. But the traffic, there's a weird gray area.
But, just to say, we don't know. Technically, right? Like, we know that Google and Reddit are making a deal, right? And that Google can see all of the citations, brand mentions, and so forth. I would posit this question. I don't think Google needs it to be a hyperlink anymore, right? At all. Like an unlinked brand mention. Like we used to do campaigns where we would go get unlinked brand mentions linked.
And
like, that was exciting because we were like, oh, there's all this missed opportunity. People talked about you, but didn't link to you. From a conversion standpoint or traffic flow, yes, please still do that. And it's a good thing. But if you have a bunch of people talking about your brand and a product in social media, even without linking to you, you will start to see the impacts, because you will end up getting brand plus query searches, right? Which create that keyword association for you, without even having the link, but it was because of this content distribution or engagement with your brand that was happening in other channels.
Is the name for that co-location? Is that I think I've heard of that. I remember this specific point you're talking about. Rand Fishkin from Moz, formerly from Moz, doing a video on this exact point, and it fascinated me. It's interesting to hear that, and it was very speculative, I think, at the time, and hadn't totally been proven out. And maybe that's why it didn't generate a lot of discussion, other than, again, just speculative discussion. But sounds like now, from what you've seen, 20 years plus in the business, if your brand gets mentioned in proximity to a certain subject, we'll get back to wine, for example. Jake's wine company, you don't have one. I'm saying you used to have one.
Sure.
Jake's wine company gets mentioned in association with Merlot or Cabernet. That without the link, that should help improve rankings for those types of search terms.
It would. Because on the knowledge graph side, Google is now creating an association and a vector model of your brand and those terms. Now, whether or not it's linked back to your domain name in that instance is not necessarily relevant. It can be helpful, but if you're in the knowledge graph and Google knows that Jake Bohall is this entity with high confidence, and then it sees these related topics, and it knows that my entity, when you search my name, I've got a knowledge panel with my website. Like it can infer, that there could be a link there, right? And grant me some authority around that topic and boost my site. I will say that we don't actually know anything when it comes to links. We know that they work. We know that sometimes they don't. And it seems that it is in every case that you try to scale it and artificially manipulate it, that you start running into scenarios where there is a threshold where you see like, hey, that didn't seem to make a difference.
Diminishing returns.
And like I said, you build 100 and maybe 90 of them, Google just silently said, nope, I don't trust those. And as a consumer buying links, you have no idea. And so I think that link building campaigns should always be centered around, how do I take a solid promotional project, whether it's a deal or sale that we're having, or this landing, like this actual campaign that I'm trying to promote, like how do we get the most reach for that? And that the link building concept like naturally starts to occur behind it. So instead of focusing on a count of links, I mean, like ultimately some people need, like they
don't see a metric.
Yeah, they like, I need a number,
quantitative, right?
For like, why did I spend $10,000? How many links did I get? Because saying like, I don't know, like here's 1,000 links, but maybe half of them aren't real. That's not effective or whatever is not going to work. So I try to shy away from that these days with clients. I mean, link building is valuable. Every correlation study will show you that sites that have more links rank better than those that don't. But generally speaking, sites that have more links also just have more products, more fans, like a whole lot of other things that are more actual correlation than causation. And while I know without any question that I can manipulate rankings with links, I am not in a position today that I could say that at scale I can manipulate rankings with links.
Before we move on from the subject of link building per se or link acquisition, what are some of the things that nonprofits can do to help put themselves in position to accumulate links, or even just accumulate the brand mentions that we surmise could be potentially equally as valuable?
Thinking about ways that your customers would want to share. So all of your volunteers are making an impact, right? So like anytime that you can give your volunteers something to share, like showcasing them, highlighting them, things like that. So like ego bait kind of stuff.
Yes.
Like that's an easy way to get shares, like the impact. So any impact statement, case study, like or some of like the data, like, how many meals did we deliver last week, right? Like we made a difference. Okay, if we compared, this pile of money to, this pile of food, like those sorts of like visual representations that you can catch attention in social media, because that will perpetuate the sharing and the mention. So specifically drive new link development opportunities for a nonprofit. You need to identify what is the value that you are providing to your audiences. And then within like real marketing, right? Like, and within that, what motivates them? Because if we can outtake some of those key emotional triggers, we can leverage that with new content or new imagery that will get shared.
Interesting. Having known you a long time, like I have, I wasn't expecting to talk nearly as much about social media today as we are. Although of course it makes sense to me, everything you're saying. So are you finding more and more that when the discussion of, again, I need links, I heard that drives rankings, when that comes up more and more, you're pointing towards, obviously, what's some great content we can create, but also then how are we going to distribute that for maximum reach? Because it's that reach, it sounds like, that is really central to the process.
Yeah, I mean, Google tried to incorporate a social weighting in the algorithm a long time ago, right? And then, I mean, even pre-Google Plus, there was like, some voting options that we had for a little while.
Right.
If you can think about it this way, if let's just say you have a Twitter/X profile and you've got 10,000 engaged users, like that is a better metric for Google to weight your authority than it is for them to say, oh, you've got 10,000 backlinks. Because 10,000 engaged users that means they have profile. They can see for each of the people who like you, what does that audience look like? And remember, Google's got an entire ad platform that is strictly based on matching audiences to keywords. And so if they can identify your social following and what those audiences look like, then they can better match what are the types of people and searches that are looking for the products that you're offering, and quite frankly, what distinguishes you from a competitor brand and their audience.
What about this notion that social is a walled garden? Is that a dated mantra? This idea that Google can't access, Meta and crawl it, or there used to be a lot of limitations around Twitter. Maybe that's changed. Are you operating under the assumption that they can get access to whatever the hell they want in terms of assessing?
I know that I'm not Google and I can get access to most anything that I want. So I can't imagine that Google, even though they're just maybe violating some terms of service somewhere, I can't imagine that they either don't access that information or don't have an equivalent metric. Think about it this way. When Google's being sort of lambasted about monopolization and blah, 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 I get it, understand.
Yeah.
From a search engine perspective, like Ahrefs is trying to launch Yep, right? We've got Perplexity and all these different search engines. There is an aspect of user behavior and data, just pure query data over the last 20 years that Google has that nobody else has. And so it's you're literally saying I think because this guy is an expert, he's got 20 years, let's pretend Google's a human, has 20 years of experience directly counseling people on how to do X. And that there is something that isn't special about that knowledge, inherent knowledge that they gain versus some new person who's trying to understand, maybe there's efficiencies for Perplexity starting out or Yep starting out as a search engine, but they have lost all of the context of other information. And when you have all of this other stuff and potentially blurred lines between what comes out of Gmail or Chrome or ads or YouTube, or, their fingers and Google Analytics, they have all of this data.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that they really need to see who my friends are on Facebook to know who in a macro level modeling, who I am and, what I'm looking for. I am not so special in my search history that there's not somebody times 1,000 out there that's behaving the same way that I am, that they can predictably provide a great result because of.
I've been told that I should solicit my viewers more for comments. So I think on this point about whether or not Google can or needs to access social media data to influence rankings or understand authority, please enter your comments below the video and tell Jake you agree with them or disagree with them.
I think they want it, right? Openly, they need it, they want it, but I don't think they have to have it. I think it's a nice to have.
So we only have a couple minutes left, unfortunately. I feel like we could go
What do you got?
At length, but let's just talk about, for lack of better phrasing, the brass tacks of content creation and kind of what to create. You've already touched on it to a degree. And then let's layer that discussion with ChatGPT. Again, we won't have nearly enough time for it, but let's talk about ChatGPT as a vehicle to ideate what to create, how you guys are using it, and then just in general, how you're thinking about what to create, how to create it for maximum benefit for SEO.
Couple of concepts to unpack. Number one,
a lot there.
I think, for a nonprofit, one of the biggest challenges on a content side is that they're either over creating because they're just trying to just create and they've got volunteers and everybody thinks I'm a volunteer, I'll contribute an article and I've helped, right? Which a lot of times for nonprofit, score, right? The amount of effort that there was and hey guys, 75% of your content is not great. I know
Score is a nonprofit that focuses on educating entrepreneurs.
Yes. Service Corps of Retired Executives.
Yeah, right? We collaborated on it at one point.
Those businesses tend to have often an influx of content, and we have to clear out the garbage. And then you have those that are trying to create content. And the challenge that they often see is that either they want to create content about everything, and it's something that's already commonplace, right? Like the classic, I'm a pizza shop, so I should write articles about how to make dough and what kinds of tomatoes exist in the world and what kind of growing regions are appropriate. And it's like, just, I want a pizza,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Yeah.
and so like, there's a lot, I think, especially for nonprofits who have limited budget, when you're trying to create content, you want content that's going to motivate or engage your audience around whatever emotional triggers you're trying to use in your marketing campaign. ChatGPT is fantastic for that. The first case of my using ChatGPT was engaging with it in a persona model where I had it create a panel of an expert, an entrepreneur, and and a buyer, and basically pitted it in its own. I watched a cage match between the different personas it built, with one person trying to sell the product, the buyer asking questions and getting answers, and the expert weighing in when he's like, that's wrong, you're lying. It ended up being this fantastic discovery for us, because we realized that we could leverage this persona, like buyer persona idea in ChatGPT, to have it present the headlines that are going to both motivate a user around the pain points that they have using the ADA model, right? So, we can now, I have some GPTs that we've set up that we can give it a landing page, a product, what we think are awesome about our product, and what our customers, maybe some testimonials or something. And in exchange, it'll come back and it'll say, for awareness, like, did you know, right? Like there's, the just trying to get you to understand that you have a problem that you didn't know you have. So problem unaware, moving to problem aware of like, how do I do this? I know there's a problem, to, like comparing brands. So brand awareness. And,
right. Back to that journey that Google's trying to understand for every purchase.
ChatGPT is fantastic at creating that journey and tying those headlines and those threads together in something where like your awareness level headlines are great for simultaneously generating images and things for ad campaigns, because you're trying to build awareness. Like, are you ready to melt this summer? Right. And it's an HVAC company, right? And it's like, don't forget to get your tune up before it's too hot and too expensive. And so like those things then lead into articles about how to make sure that your air conditioner is working properly. I should have stayed with the nonprofit reference. Sorry. The journey with ChatGPT, you can create what those headlines are. You can create outlines by just interrogating it as to like, what questions would somebody want? Right. What would they expect behind that headline? And with the cautionary warning that if you're creating commonplace content, like there's a world where eventually all content's GPT related, it's all from historical models of content that already existed. And now the only value that your content brings is whatever you did to make it unique and special. So the GPT model does not have your special sauce unless you create an assistant and load in, like your company's mission statement, your values, and like you can start seeding it with the things that make you special, that is unique data, and have it start contributing that into the article suggestions it's making. Because having another article about, what hunger means, right? Or like, how little it costs to feed a child, like you're not different, and you're not going to get more links or more rankings from that type of content. But if you can tie in something that creates new value, then you're going to be considered.
Or experience specific to your, in this case, nonprofit, which I think brings us right back to EEAT. As part of what they're looking for in that framework is, does this organization have true expertise or experience with this specific thing, and is that demonstrated throughout their content?
Or I think more importantly, does it contribute new knowledge, right? So like generative AI is in search, like they can generate whatever responses they want on the fly. What they can't do are those things that they haven't seen before. So if they see that you have an article and it's a new approach for something, or has new stats, new data in it, like now you're contributing value that's outside of like the global corpus of knowledge, right? Like you're more than Wikipedia. And now you have value. And like, that is what will distinguish your business in the future, because everybody's going to be using ChatGPT and similar models to fill in all of the blanks.
Yeah, perfect cliffhanger, I think, to leave off on. We're out of time, but I'll have to have you back, whether it's virtual or back here in the studio, to talk more about ChatGPT. Of course, there's a lot of pressure to release that content quickly once we record it so it doesn't get dated and stale.
Wait, was that ChatGPT?
I better get this episode
3
out
months
quickly.
ago. Oh, 4-0.
Excellent. Jake, for those that want to get in touch with you or learn more about your agency, what's the best way to do that?
HiveDigital.com, or I'm on X. I'm Jake Bohall, but HiveDigital.com. It's be the fastest, easiest way to get a hold of somebody.
Excellent. Thanks for being on the show, man. Great to have you here.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it.